Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is July 19th. On this day in 2016, what began as an ordinary summer bike ride ended in unimaginable tragedy for 20-year-old Sierah Jogan, a bright, beloved college student from rural Ohio. When she failed to come home, panic set in. A massive search effort followed, but what was uncovered in the investigation shocked even seasoned law enforcement. Today, we remember Sierra Jogan, not just the horror of her murder, but the life that she lived, the justice that followed, and the legacy she left behind. Let's get started. Born on February 11, 1996 in the close-knit town of Metamora, Ohio, Sierra Jogan was the heartbeat of her family and a fixture in her community. She was smart, driven, and athletic, playing volleyball at Evergreen High School, where she earned respect not only for her skills, but for her sportsmanship. Her teachers and classmates described her as dependable, upbeat, and someone who made everyone around her feel special. But she was also hard-headed and rarely let anyone else win an argument. After graduating high school, Sierra pursued a degree in human resource management at the University of Toledo. In 2016, she was in her second year, home for the summer, and working at an ice cream shop. But she was already dreaming big and had talked about launching her own business one day. To her friends and family, her potential felt limitless. She was especially close to her mother Sheila and her stepfather Scott, who had raised her as his own. Her longtime boyfriend, Josh Kolozinski, was her high school sweetheart. They shared a love of biking, fitness, and were planning on eventually getting married. Just weeks before, the couple had taken a trip to Miami with friends, and their photos were filled with sun and laughter. Sierra had a way of making you feel like you mattered. She had that rare gift of being both ambitious and grounded. She was confident and humble. She lived fully, she loved fiercely, and she made people feel seen. And that's what made her disappearance on July 19, 2016, all the more devastating. That evening, Sierra and Josh went for a bike ride. It was a common activity for them. They had been over at Josh's house, and Sierra was returning home, so she rode her bike while Josh followed on his motorcycle. Around 6:30 p.m., they were on County Road 6, just a short ride from her grandparents' house. At that point, they split up, and Josh turned to go back home while Sarah just went the short distance. But as night fell and her phone remained silent, Josh began to worry. He retraced their route and came across something terrifying. Sierra's purple bike was lying on its side in a cornfield. The area looked disturbed. There were drag marks, a broken Fitbit wristband, and no sign of Sierra. He called her family immediately. They rushed to the scene, and by 10 p.m., police had been notified. What should have been an ordinary night was now a full-scale emergency. Law enforcement launched a search, and within hours, the missing persons bulletin was issued. The community also sprang into action. Hundreds of volunteers scoured ditches, fields, and wooded paths. Online, her photo was shared thousands of times. But every passing hour made the situation that much more urgent. Authorities pieced together what little they could from surveillance footage, GPS data, and interviews. And one name quickly emerged: James Worley, a man who lived just a few miles away and had been seen in the area the night that Sierra vanished. Worley had been stopped by police late on July 19th, not far from where Sierra's bike was found. He claimed that he had broken down on his motorcycle, but he had fresh scratches, acted nervously, and refused to let deputies search his property. And that raised red flags. A search warrant was quickly obtained, and what detectives found was every parent's worst nightmare. Behind a barn on Worley's property, they discovered a hidden room, essentially a prison. It had restraints, handcuffs, rubber tubing, and duct tape. There were adult diapers, latex gloves, and even a carpet-lined freezer with what would eventually be proven to be bloodstains. In a nearby trailer, they found bloodstained clothing and items that eventually tested positive for Sierra's DNA. But even more disturbing was what they found in his past. In 1990, Worley had been convicted of abducting a woman named Robin Gardner. She'd been riding her bike when he struck her with his truck, got out, hit her on the head, and placed her in handcuffs. He then held a screwdriver to her throat and said, quote, "I'll kill you if you don't stop screaming," end quote. Fortunately, Robin managed to escape and flag down a passing motorist. Worley was sentenced to 4 to 10 years in prison for the attack, but was released after only serving 3. The similarities between this crime and Sierra's disappearance were chilling. The community that had rallied to find Sierra now had to ask, how was someone like this allowed to walk free? By July 21st, Worley was arrested and charged with Sierra's abduction. The following day, a search party found Sierra's body buried in a shallow grave. She had been murdered. Investigators continued to comb Worley's property, and what they found painted a picture of a predator that had been preparing, planning, and perfecting his method for years. The hidden room behind the barn was fully outfitted for captivity. It had ventilation, and there were restraints built into the floorboards. Among the evidence found was what police called an abduction kit that contained masks, chloroform, ropes, and disguises. There were journal entries and videos where Worley detailed his fantasies. His earlier crime in 1990 had shown the signs. He used similar methods and similar tools. And after his early release, he kept a low profile. But, quietly, he was preparing to strike again. The case against James Worley was overwhelming. He was indicted on 19 charges, including aggravated murder, abduction, felonious assault, and abuse of a corpse. Prosecutors sought the death penalty. During the trial, Robin Gardner testified, recounting her 1990 abduction in heartbreaking detail. The parallels to Sierra's case were undeniable. Forensic evidence tied Sierra to Worley's barn. Her DNA was found on multiple surfaces, and GPS records placed Worley at the scene. The jury was presented with not just the facts, but a timeline that outlined a horrific, premeditated crime. On March 28, 2018, the jury found James Worley guilty on 17 of the 19 counts. Weeks later, he was sentenced to death. Judge Jeffrey Robinson called it, quote, "the worst crime I've seen in 30 years on the bench," end quote. For Sierra's family, it was justice, but it wasn't healing. Her mother, Sheila, said, quote, "We made a promise to Sierra that we would fight for her, and we kept that promise," end quote. In the face of unimaginable grief, Sierra's family turned their pain into purpose. Led by her mother, Sheila, they lobbied for legislation that would track violent offenders like James Worley. At the time, Ohio had a sex offender registry, but no database for those convicted of abduction or other violent crimes. In 2018, just months after Worley's sentencing, the Ohio House and Senate passed Sierra's Law. It created a violent offender database requiring those convicted of specific violent crimes to register with local authorities and to update their location regularly. The law officially went into effect in March 2019. But the family didn't stop there. They also launched Justice for Sierra, a nonprofit offering self-defense classes, safety education, and awareness programs in schools. Their goal is to empower young people with tools that Sierra never had the chance to use. Through their work, they've made sure that Sierra's name means more than tragedy. It means action, and it means change. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found Sierra's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!